What's going on, you guys? It is Corbin Stuckey of PixelTalk here, and today we're going to be talking about The Last of Us Part 2, one of the most anticipated games of 2020, and the sequel to 2013's Last of Us, which is considered a masterpiece. I reviewed that game on my channel. I absolutely loved it when I first played it back in 2013. I played it again this year so I can be ready for Last of Us Part 2, and that review is on my channel, like I said, so if you'd like to check out the review for The Last of Us 1, it's on my channel. Check it out. And today we're going to be talking about The Last of Us Part 2, and there's a lot of circulations and speculations and controversy behind this game. This game is being talked about throughout the internet for the past week. And I feel as though there are some things that I need to mention outside of the game itself and just what's been going on around the game before I even get into the actual game itself. So this game was actually delayed indefinitely this year. I believe the original release date was supposed to be in May, but they delayed it indefinitely due to uncertain reasons. They never really went into specifics as to why the game was delayed. It could have been because it wasn't ready. They weren't sure of it. It could have been because of COVID-19. The game was delayed, though, indefinitely. They did not have a release date. And after this game was delayed, someone actually leaked footage of the game online that spoiled a lot of things about the game. Like specific plot details that have you go on this journey in the game. Like a very key moment that the game is entirely centered around, this act of violence that occurs in the game. This was leaked a month ago, and because of this leak, Naughty Dog was like, okay, you know what, we don't care what people are saying, we're just gonna go ahead and release the game. We made this is our story, we stand by this, and we're going to go ahead and release this to the public. We don't care of the spoilers, this is what we made. Here is The Last of Us Part 2. And I have been playing it since Friday. I've actually been playing it for 4 days, probably 8 to 9 hours a day. So a total of maybe over 20 hours of playing this game in this room. And by God, this is the longest game I have ever played. And it's barely even open world. It's a straight story-driven campaign where you go in one direction. There is some exploration, and we'll definitely be getting into that, and this is how I'm going to handle this review. I'm going to talk about the gameplay at first. I'm going to talk about the feel of the game, how the game made me feel in terms of tone, and then the last thing that we're going to cover is the story, because I feel as though I cannot even dive into the story without even going into the spoilers, because the game starts with a huge spoiler. I can't. I have to talk about spoilers. I have to talk about what happens to characters in this game. So I will let you know when I get into spoilers. But for now, I'm going to talk about the game and the feel of it and how it compares to the first game. And then we'll talk about spoilers. So let's go ahead and just talk about the game itself briefly, because there's a lot to talk about in the story. Okay, let me go ahead and get my notes right here. My long ass notes. So you can tell as soon as you put this disc in, the first shot tells you that this is probably one of the most beautiful games you are ever going to play. Just the scenery and lighting of this game is nothing that I have ever seen before on a PlayStation game. It actually makes me feel like we are going to be expecting a lot from the PlayStation 5, because if this is what the PlayStation 4 is capable of, I cannot wait to see what the PlayStation 5 provides, because this is just a beautiful way to start the game. One of the first shots that you see in this game is of just you riding a horse and seeing the sun shine down on you as you're riding in this valley. And I actually was emotional just looking at this. I was like, oh my God, this is beautiful. This is a beautiful looking game. And a lot of the things that made The Last of Us Part 1 beautiful are in this game as well. Even though that this is a world that you don't want to necessarily be in, it's actually a dreaded world, and there's a lot of violent stuff happening. The gameplay and what you're able to do in this game is what keeps you invested. You're able to approach things from two different angles. You can either be stealth or go into it in such a savage mode, just like in the first game. The gameplay is what really keeps you invested, and it feels as though even though there's all of these enemies around you, you're going to be able to survive if you use your brain and use your resources, which is something that I really appreciate about the first one, and I'm so glad that they didn't really change a whole lot, but they just added what they could into this game to make it stand out. This is basically a very updated version of the last one. I really appreciated that they didn't change a whole lot of things, and I was very familiar with the controllers because I actually played the first one right before playing the second one, so not a whole lot has changed. There are a couple things that they have changed, like, you know, when you have to squeeze in between a very narrow gap and you have to press on the X button just to go through. I will say this also, it's very fluid though. Whenever you have to like jump over objects and you have to run towards a specific direction, it feels like you are actually running in the game. The running is very fluid, and it makes for some really good chase scenes, which I call those scenes nightmare fuel. It's scary, dudes. Like, this is actually, like, I would say probably scarier than, like, the first one, because you're being chased by infected and clickers in this game, and it's just, like, this game makes you sweat, because not only are you having fun in the game in terms of gameplay, but you kind of get this sense of unease, and you're sweating, and you're like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. It's a horrifying game, actually. And this game also finally offers a good reason why the PlayStation controller should have a touchpad. You can play guitar in this game. Loved it. The main location of the game is actually in Seattle, where the city has been taken over by certain groups, and you go there for a very specific purpose as Ellie. Not going to go into why you go there just yet, but you go there regardless. And as you're exploring the city, it almost feels like it's open world. It's almost like kind of what they were trying to do with Uncharted 4 and that one level of the game where you're kind of in like this Jeep or vehicle or whatever, and you have to like go to certain places and towers and buildings. It really felt like that portion of Uncharted 4 where they tried to add an open world feel to it, where it was just such a vast amount of area. But it's definitely better than Uncharted 4. Like, you are in Seattle for, like, a huge majority of the game. It's a positive and it's a negative, and we'll definitely get into that when we get into spoilers, but it actually feels like a city. You can go into abandoned shops, you can find materials to, like, better your weapons and ammo. It actually feels like the game is not wanting you to go in, like, one direction like the first one, but you can actually scavenge for items in certain stores or buildings. This actually does feel like an open world game, and I'm curious as to know what Naughty Dog is going to do after The Last of Us, because I can't imagine them doing another Uncharted game. I would love to see what they would do with like a new concept and putting it into like an open world fashion. It's obvious from this game and that one level from Uncharted 4 that that's something that they want to do, and maybe they just think that they're a little bit limited to doing that because they're such a story-driven company. But you can have, like, games that are story-driven and have a good environment. I think there are a lot of games to prove that. So, Naughty Dog, if you want to go ahead and make an open-world game, I think you've validated yourself thus far with just this game alone. Go ahead and do that. And just like the first one, the game is not about just the violence and shooting and having to get from point A to point B. It's actually having you use your head sometimes, where basically you have to figure out a way to get over this barrier or through this gate. And there were portions in the first game where Ellie, where sometimes you would help her go through this level of water because she couldn't swim. You would use like a board to get her to like the other side. Because she's grown up, she's learned a lot over the past 4 years that this game takes place after, and she knows how to swim now. So I was like, there's not really a lot of levels where I get to use my head. But there's a lot of things that they add into this game where you're having to like figure out like a plan and like a plan B to get over like these gates. When you get to Seattle for the first time, there's actually an entire level. I believe this was like an hour, possibly an hour and a half long, dedicated to basically you trying to start a generator to open this gate. But the generator doesn't have gas, so you have to venture forth into the middle of the city where infected are taking over some of the buildings, and you have to try to find gas and then get back to that said entrance to put the gas in the generator, and then you have to use a code to open the gate to get through the gate, and it's just like, oh my gosh. And that is actually one of the negatives of the game. This game is incredibly long. It's not, okay, I take that back. It's not really a negative, but it does get tiresome sometimes. There is actually a lot of things that you gain from just this long hour runtime of these levels. Like, there are certain character interactions when you're talking to whoever you're with, and you gain a better understanding of the relationships between some of the characters, which I really enjoyed, especially in that first portion of Seattle. And sometimes you have to use a rope just to climb this side of the building. And by the way, the physics of the rope in this game are fantastic. You know what? Let's go ahead and talk about spoilers, because that seems to be like what everybody is wanting to talk about in terms of this game. And that is the main focus of this game, is the story. We have to talk about the story. It's something that people have been just crazy about over IMDb and Metacritic and every other review site regarding this game. Whether or not that's their pro of the game or their con of the game, it seems that everybody is talking about the story. So let's talk about the story of The Last of Us Part 2. The beginning. So, the driving force of this game is Ellie witnesses the murder of Joel. It seems that someone has tracked Joel into the city of Jackson, and Ellie witnesses this murder, and she ventures out to Seattle to try to find this woman who was responsible for Joel's death. And as you're venturing forth in Seattle, this girl named Dina goes with Ellie, because there is a relationship that's blossoming in the game, which I really liked, actually. By the way, do you guys think that, like, Ellie likes Dina because of her infatuation with dinosaurs? Because of that flashback sequence where Ellie and Joel go to a dinosaur museum? Do you think, like, Ellie likes Dina because Dina sounds like dinosaur? I'm stupid. So you're spending a lot of time in Seattle. Like, this is where the main stories of the game take place. You are in Seattle for probably a good 15 hours. And I'm not really sure if it's just because the game is so long, or maybe just the pacing isn't just right. This game is long. This game is just, it seems like you are on one level for such a huge amount of time, or at least you are trying to achieve one goal for about like 2 to 3 hours. One of them being the first things that you do in the game, like I mentioned, is you're trying to find gas to power this generator in this game. And you are spending a large majority of time, probably like an hour to an hour and a half, because you're having to go to like different buildings to try to find gas. And you'll go to a building and you'll find out that there's no gas in this building. So you're like, okay, we have to go to this other building and we have to go to this other building. But I will say that the pros of this amount of runtime is you get to learn more about these characters and the relationships and how they liked each other way before they started dating each other. And they talked about how they met and things, and I really appreciated that downtime. And it's definitely the dialogue that creates a background for these characters, and you understand why they like each other so much and why Dina is there with Ellie. As you're venturing forth in the city, there's a lot of enemies that you encounter. Obviously, you encounter infected because it's The Last of Us, but the infected are kind of like the environmental antagonists of this game, like The Walking Dead. I'm going to compare this game to The Walking Dead for a second. It seems like even though that there are infected in this game, and they are an antagonist, they're not really the main focus. The actual antagonists of this game are the people. I will say that as I was playing this game, I was actually more fearful of the people in this game than anything, because I think they're just such a main focus. And because you are Ellie, and you know this girl as to be like this 14-year-old girl from the first one, you kind of fear for her, and you're like, oh my god, like I hope nothing happens to her. But as you play the game, you start to realize that this isn't the Ellie that you played as in the first one. She is all grown up, she's 18 years old, she's obviously learned a lot of things after the first game, and you start to put a little bit more trust in her. You're like, oh, she actually has a handle of this situation, so I think we're gonna be okay. But I want to see where this game takes me. The main enemies in this game, in terms of people, are the Wolves, which they're like this built military faction. They have guns and weaponry. And then you have the Scars, which are a religious cult, which we'll definitely get into in a little bit. The Scars, when you're seeing them for the first time in Ellie's point of view, you're like, oh my god, who are these people? Like, they're like killing me with their bow and arrows, and like I'm scared of them, but I don't know why. Who are these religious nuts? And you're constantly wondering that as you're Ellie. And this game actually kind of forces you to read the notes a little bit, because it provides a little bit of context as to what's going on in the game and why the Wolves and the Scars are versing each other. So I would suggest reading those notes, but I have to admit that is kind of a negative, because you shouldn't have to be reliant on extra notes to learn a little bit more about your story and lore. The story in the game itself, through scenes and cutscenes, should be able to supply just enough for you to gain a basic understanding of why these people are at war. It's explained just enough in the cutscenes, but I feel as though if I'm ever going to play this game a second time, which it's probably not going to be for a while because it's a long game, I'm probably not going to touch this game for another 5 to 6 years, I'd probably go back and read all the notes. In terms of the story and why the story starts, I feel as though that's a huge negative that everybody seems to be talking about. And I have a feeling that people are talking about this in a lot of comments on videos and reviews. because that was the first scene that they saw, and they just stopped playing the game and they just went straight to the internet without even finishing the game at all. I feel like that might be some people that are doing that. I was actually on board with why Ellie has to go to Seattle. I didn't like Joel dying. I don't think anyone likes Joel dying in this game. That's the point. Whenever you have a character that you played as in the first one, when you're playing as this character throughout the entirety of the first one, and some random person that you don't know kills him, yeah, that's going to make you upset. Ellie, the character that you play as, is upset. So of course she's going to go to Seattle and try to find this girl, Abby, that did this act. So I just feel as though, I think people are missing the point. Yes, it's supposed to make you upset. And I feel as though it's just like, going into the ending of the first one a little bit, I kind of saw it coming. He did that terrible act at that hospital where he was trying to save Ellie's life. Yes, that is a good act in itself, but in regards to what he actually did, it was actually kind of messed up. He killed a bunch of different people for this one girl. And I understand that he built a relationship with this girl, but it's just what he had to do to commit this good act. He had to do a lot of bad things in return. One of them being that he killed that doctor, which I even remember playing that when I was 18 and that scene happening. I was like, ooh, did I have to do that? That's dark. So I like how the game's themes have to deal with consequences. Everything that you do in this world, especially in this world where there's no laws or no government to tell you what to do, there still are going to be consequences. There's going to be people that are going to go after you because of things that you've done in your past. And because of what Joel did, where he saved this girl and killed this facility and basically, destroyed any chance of there being a cure in this world. Yes, people are going to come after you. So for him to have died in that first scene, I was like, I don't want that to happen, but it makes sense. And it drives the story because you have Ellie going to Seattle trying to find this girl. And as you're playing as Ellie in Seattle, you have an understanding of why she is doing this. She just lost her father figure. So I'm on board with the Ellie story, 100%. I have no problems with the Ellie story. I was invested the entire time. I was rooting for Ellie. It made me want to continue the game, even though the game was just so long. I had no problems with the first act of the game. It's the second act that I kind of have some issues with. So there's a scene in the game where Ellie comes face to face with Abby, and Abby's pointing a gun at Ellie, and it cuts to black. And it's like, oh my god, what's happening? And then it showcased that we're going to be venturing Abby's past, where she's talking with her dad, and it turns out that her dad was actually the surgeon that was supposed to be getting the cure from Ellie. And I was on board with this for the first 15 minutes. I was like, okay, I'm going to be seeing why Abby wants to kill Joel. I'm going to be seeing what happened at the Fireflies base. I'm okay with this as well. I'm okay with seeing what made this girl want to go out and do this violent act. I was so on board with that for the first 15 minutes. And then it has you go back to day one in Seattle as Abby, right after she kills Joel. They're back in Seattle. They're working for the Wolves. They're trying to survive in Seattle because of these scars. I will say this. Naughty Dog has balls. They basically are telling you, hey, you're going to play as this character that killed off the main character in the first one. I have to give them some respect for that because that is pretty ballsy. And I will admit, I was feeling an understanding for Abby. I understood where she was coming from in that first 15 minutes. I understand why she did what she was doing. It's just when you get to Seattle and you're having to play the game with these two Scar members who are being chased by other Scars because of something that they did that was against their religion. And then you kind of see this theme of oh, well, Abby and the Scars don't want to be a part of this war anymore. It's a good story. I was invested in that story. It's just the problem with it is we already had such a good story in the beginning of this game that was fueled by revenge, and you had an understanding of why Ellie was going to Seattle to find Joel's murderer. It's just that the game is asking you to take a step back for just 10 hours or 8 to 10 hours to play as Abby, a character that you don't really know about. And the game is asking you to play as her, to play this story that is kind of somewhat unrelated to your initial story in terms of theme. Abby's story basically revolves around the idea of how they don't want to be a part of violence anymore. There's themes of religion and how if you don't follow your religion, especially if you're of the LGBT community, like if you're a girl who wants to be a transgender boy, like one of the two kids that you come across, the game deals with a lot of themes that I just feel as though are unrelated to the initial story that we're exploring. And this subplot, you're having to venture forth in this, secondary story for such a huge amount of time. Like, it's absurd. It's like, yo, I want to go back to, like, the original story. Because I'm so much more invested in that story because I know Ellie. I've known her for 7 years. And now you're having me play as this character who I don't really know of. And my initial first impressions of her is me not liking her because you killed off the main character of the first game. But you want me to play as her. This review is long. Oh my gosh. I just felt as though the themes of the first and second story were really trying to force themselves together. You have Abby that feels a little bit of guilt for leaving those two kids behind. And then she goes back to save them, and she grows this conscience of she doesn't want to be a part of this war. And then as soon as we get back to the portion of where Ellie and Abby are facing each other and they're fighting, Abby almost kills Dina. But she stops because Lev is right there, and she has like this moment of like, oh, I really shouldn't be doing this. It didn't really work for me. It didn't have the impact that I wanted to because I just think that the stories are just two different stories. Yes, going in the same direction, but they're not doing a DNA spiral, which I feel as though really should have happened for me to believe that this could have gone the way that it did. That's my only thing. But then we get back to the Ellie storyline, and this is where the game totally picks back up. Because I'm back with Ellie, she's living in a house with Dina, they have a child because it was revealed that Dina was actually pregnant while she was in Seattle. And it's Jesse's baby, but Jesse unfortunately died, so Ellie takes over as the secondary parent, and there's a shot in that scene, and it's so beautiful, just like equivalent to the first shot that you see in the game, where they're on a tractor, and it's like, man, the game should just end here. Like, she's happy, she's got a family, she's probably accepted the fact that, like, she almost died and that she's got a good life now. The game should just end here. Nope, she's getting off the tractor. Oh my gosh. So Tommy, who somehow survived the attack of Abby, brings forth some information that he knows where Abby and Lev are. And Dana's like, how dare you, like, bring forth this information? And, like, I understand where she's coming from. It's like, they survived this event. They're very happy now. Like, I totally respect where Dina is coming from. But then you kind of just see it in Ellie's face where you're like, oh no, she's gonna go after her. She's not taking this well. So Ellie goes off to find Abby, and it turns out that they've been under this slavery cult for 2 months, I guess. And Ellie gets to Abby right before she's about to die, and they actually have a brawl in the ocean. And I was like, yes, this is exactly like what I've been looking for. I've been wanting this confrontation for like the entirety of the game. It's been so long. And then Abby bites her fingers off. Oh my god. This is what I've been looking for. And then Ellie just suddenly stops. And then she remembers like a brief moment that she had with Joel. And it's revealed that this brief moment was a conversation about forgiveness. And I was just like, oh my god. This is getting heavy. So I actually really liked that portion of the game where Ellie is getting all of this frustration out as she's fighting Abby. And then all of a sudden she just stops and she's like, I need to just put an end to this. And the two just finally go their separate ways. Abby and Lev go to meet up with the last remaining Fireflies, and Ellie tries to go back home. And it is heartbreaking. Ellie goes back home and nobody's there. All of her stuff is in her room, but all the furniture in the living room and everything belonging to Dina is not there anymore. And then Ellie tries to have like some time to herself, and she tries to play the guitar, and she doesn't have her fingers anymore, and she can't even do that. She can't even play guitar anymore, and it's just so sad. And then Ellie leaves the house, and it's just so ominous, and you don't know where she's going. And then the game cuts to black, and I'm just like, you've broken me, game. You have emotionally scarred me. I cannot believe that I'm saying this, but I think The Last of Us Part 2 is kind of like The Last Jedi of video games. I like the first portion of the game where you're playing as Ellie. I like the last portion of the game where you're playing as Ellie. But for the game to make you play as Abby for this amount of time, to make you like her, the game is basically trying to make you like her, where she is afraid of heights, and she's trying to save these kids, and she's kind of funny. The game is just trying so hard for you to like this character, but it's so hard because you had such a bad first impression of her because she killed Joel. And you kind of also have to play as Abby to gain a better understanding of who the Scars are and who they follow and what their principles are. So it's just, it forces you a lot to play as this character. The game tries to also add elements to Abby to make you have more fun with her, where she can craft shotgun bullets and they can light enemies on fire, and then she finds a flamethrower in the game. The game is just trying way too hard. It's like, I understand where she's coming from. That 15 minutes alone told me why she did what she did. If I was to play this game again, I'm probably not going to play it for a long time because it's just so long. I probably won't even touch it for another 5 to 6 years. I probably won't even get a remastered version for PlayStation 5 if they ever decide to do that, but if I was to play this game again, I am so glad that it provides chapters. Kind of feels like The Last Jedi, where it's like you kind of want to skip over some scenes. Like, there are some scenes where you're invested in it, and you're like, oh my gosh, this has taken way too long. Besides that middle portion of the game, I think it is unfair to say that this is a bad game. This is actually a really, really good game. I consider it a game that's very well polished. I think it goes past what the PlayStation 4 was even capable of. I can't wait to see what the PlayStation 5 is going to do. I understood the motives of the characters. I absolutely loved the game. I really did. I'm not just saying that because I liked Last of Us and Naughty Dog and anything Uncharted related. I do like The Last of Us Part 2. It's just that forced middle portion that I really don't like. You can like a game and dislike some things about it, some story elements. I really, truly believe that it's just that portion of the game that I just feel as though was incredibly forced. I feel as though Naughty Dog could have presented that idea of feeling sympathy for your antagonist in that first 15 minutes, and then if you wanted to explore a lot of the extra stuff in that portion of Abby's storyline, just condense it. This is actually a perfect analogy. One second. It feels like you're playing Uncharted 4. You love Nathan Drake. You've played him in 3 other games, maybe 4 other games if you got a PlayStation Vita and played Uncharted, The Golden Abyss or whatever. It feels like you are playing as Nathan Drake in Uncharted 4. And then Nathan Drake gets shot and he goes down a hill and it cuts to black. And you're like, oh my god, what's happening to Nathan Drake? And then all of a sudden, it has you play Uncharted Lost Legacy, where you're playing as Chloe and you're like, oh, okay, so it's just going to show like what Chloe's been doing for like the entirety of the game. And it's just going to be brief. Nope, it's an actual full-length game that is going to require like 6 to 8 hours of your time. And it's like, I want to get back to Nathan Drake. I like Nathan Drake. He's on the cover of the game. He is the main focus. It feels like a DLC game that the company is forcing you to play. That's what Abby's storyline feels like. It feels like DLC game that I have to play in order to get back to the main storyline. Perfect analogy. Would I recommend this game? Of course, I would totally recommend it, even though I don't like that middle portion. I do have to say this, though. This is probably one of the most violent video games that I have ever played. There are things that happen in this game that make you kind of question what people are capable of, and I think that is just the main theme of this game. It's like, okay, what if we like lived in this kind of world, and we wanted to take revenge and put justice into our own hands? What are we capable of? What are we willing to do in terms of violence so we can get that justice that we want? I like this game. I really do. It was exhausting to play because it felt like work, and there are a lot of sequences in this game that are definitely going to give me nightmares, for sure. So yeah, guys, that's my thoughts on The Last of Us Part 2. By God, this is probably going to be a long video, because it was a long game. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on the game. Those are my thoughts, really. Comment down below what you guys thought of The Last of Us Part 2. If you have played it yet, like this video, share it, and please subscribe to PixelTalk if you haven't yet for more movie reviews, game reviews, trailer reactions, gaming content, movie news, and so on. Thank you guys so much. I am Corbin Stuckey, and this is PixelTalk.